Well, the pullout of U.S. troops from NATO countries has begun. We're going to get into all the details in this video. We've talked about this in a few recent videos on this channel about how Trump's displeasure, his disappointment with the NATO countries that refused to help out during the Iran war is not just some temporary temper tantrum because of what's just happening now in Iran. It speaks to a much larger shift in U.S. policy. And we're seeing the beginnings of it happening now with the announcement about troops in Germany. We're going to get into all of that in this video, and we're going to go into what this means long term. So let's start with President Trump in the Oval Office just a couple of days ago talking about Germany. So let's hit it right here. President Trump.
Are you considering the same thing for Spain and Italy? I mean, they haven't been exactly on board.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I probably will. Why should I? Look, why shouldn't I? Italy has not been of any help to us, and Spain has been horrible, absolutely horrible. It's NATO. It's not even the fact that they're bad. It's one thing if they said nicely, or if they said, okay, we'll help, but the help's a little slow. But the level, and we helped them with Ukraine. They made a mess out of Ukraine, a total mess. And we helped them with Ukraine. Ukraine has nothing to do, we're an ocean apart. It has to do with them. It's like for them, it's their front door. We helped them. And Biden gave them $350 billion, which was insane. It's one of the reasons the war went on. But when we needed them, they were not there. We have to remember that. And so if we ever have a big one, because we didn't need any help with Iran. We had Iran right from the first day. It was over. It was over. And now it's even more so. We're so locked and loaded if we want to do it. But we didn't need the help. And to a certain extent, I asked them, I didn't need the help, but I said, yeah, we'd love to have you help because I wanted to see if they do it. And they, in all cases, they said, we don't want to get involved. And the amazing thing is they use the Strait of Hormuz. We don't. We don't use it. We don't need it. We have a lot of oil. Well, wait a minute. And they use it, we don't. And you would have thought they would have said, we would love to help you. But they didn't, which I think was a very... And Germany, he's doing a terrible job. He's got immigration problems. He's got energy problems. He's got problems of all kinds. And he's got a big problem with Ukraine.
Okay, so that was President Trump from 2 days ago. And then yesterday, we have this. We have this statement right here from yesterday. Let's pull it up here. Let's go back. Here we go.
Why is the U.S. removing troops from Germany?
We're going to cut way down, and we're cutting a lot further than 5,000. Thank you very much.
Wow. Okay. So you put those two things together. Not only do we have the headline from 2 days ago of the U.S. cutting down 5,000 troops from Germany, but then yesterday, as I showed you 2 days ago, in the previous clip, in the first clip that I played, that he's planning to pull out troops from Spain, from Italy, meaning other countries that did not provide help or worse. Like you said, Spain was terrible. They were criticizing the United States, refusing to let them use their bases that they have there, that they paid for there. And let's take a look at how this, more of the details of the story. This is a Fox News item from a couple days ago. Pentagon orders withdrawal of 5,000 U.S. troops from Germany as Trump escalates feud with MERS. About 38,000 U.S. troops are stationed in Germany, where European Command is headquarters at Stuttgart-Weingen. The Pentagon will withdraw 5,000 troops from Germany, a spokesperson confirmed to Fox News Digital. The redeployment comes amid President Donald Trump's escalating feud with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and other NATO allies after tensions over the response to the conflict involving Iran. Quote, the Secretary of War has ordered the withdrawal of approximately 5,000 troops from Germany, Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell said. This decision follows a thorough review of the department's force posture in Europe and is in recognition of theater requirements and conditions on the ground. We expect the withdrawal to be completed over the next 6 to 12 months. About 38,000 U.S. troops are stationed in Germany, home to Ramstein Air Base, this headquarters for U.S. Air Forces in Europe. The base and other American installations have long served as key logistics hubs and command centers supporting U.S. military operations in Europe and the Middle East. The U.S. troop presence in Germany has been a point of political debate in recent years. In 2020, Trump ordered the withdrawal of roughly 12,000 troops from the country, but the plan faced bipartisan resistance in Congress and was not completed before Joe Biden took office. So this has been on Trump's agenda for a while. That's an important point to remember as we get to the next thing I'm going to show you after this article. Merz, speaking Monday in Marsburg, criticized the U.S. approach to Iran, saying Washington was being humiliated by the Iranian leadership and expressing hope that the conflict would end as quickly as possible. Trump's comments followed those remarks, marking the latest flashpoint between the two leaders who have previously clashed on issues including tariffs and defense spending. On Wednesday, Trump said in a Truth Social post his administration was studying and reviewing the possible reduction of troops in Germany, adding that a decision would be made over the next short period of time. He also sharply criticized Merz, saying he doesn't know what he's talking about regarding Iran's nuclear ambitions. The Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, thinks it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon, Trump wrote. He doesn't know what he's talking about. If Iran had a nuclear weapon, the whole world would be held hostage. I am doing something with Iran right now that other nations or presidents should have done long ago. No wonder Germany's doing so poorly, both economically and otherwise. Now, as I said at the beginning of this video, the prevailing narrative is that Trump's upset about what happened in Iran, and that's why he's taking revenge on them, pulling out troops. And is this really wise? Isn't there a value to these troops? Is this really, seems like a knee-jerk reaction that Trump is having. And I pointed out in an earlier video, you may have seen it if you follow this channel, that this is not the case at all. In fact, everything that Trump is doing, everything that they are doing right now with the troops, with NATO, even with Trump saying that I didn't really need them, but I was testing them, this was all laid out in the National Security Strategy document. This is a document that the Trump administration published publicly. They published this document in November 2025. Now, I talked about this document in an earlier video, but I didn't quote from it. I want to share with you a couple of passages from it that are relevant to what we're seeing, and you'll see this is all laid out there. Here we go. So on page, this is what page? Page 12 of the document, burden sharing and burden shifting. The days of the United States propping up the entire world like a world order like Atlas are over. We count among our many allies and partners dozens of wealthy, sophisticated nations that must assume primary responsibility for their regions and contribute far more to our collective defense. President Trump has set a new global standard with the Hague Commitment, which pledges NATO countries to spend 5% of GDP on defense. I think Israel spends about 8%. And which our NATO allies have endorsed and must now meet, continuing President Trump's approach of asking allies to assume primary responsibility for their regions. The United States will organize a burden-sharing network with our government as convener and supporter. This approach ensures that burdens are shared and that all such efforts benefit from broader legitimacy. The model will be targeted partnerships that use economic tools to align incentives, share burdens with like-minded allies, and insist on reforms that anchor long-term stability. This strategic clarity will allow the United States to counter hostile and subversive influences efficiently while avoiding the overextension and diffuse focus that undermine past efforts. The United States will stand ready to help, potentially through more favorable treatment on commercial matters, technology sharing, and defense procurement. Those countries that willingly take more responsibility for security in their neighborhoods and align their export control with ours. In other words, this whole posture of reevaluating alliances, of seeing who's actually willing to share a burden, and that is going to be critical to deciding where American resources are allocated. So when you saw Trump at the beginning of this war with the Straits of Hormuz situation developing, and he said, hey, look, we want the European allies to share the burden. They use the Strait of Hormuz. We don't. They need to share the burden. And they didn't come through. Understand, this was not a knee-jerk reaction by Trump. It wasn't because the United States needed their help. Look at the Israelis and the Americans, what they were doing there. Did it look like they needed military help from these people? They didn't need it. They could work around it. But he asked for their help to see, would they share the burden? He was testing them. When he says he was testing them, it's not just sour grapes. He was testing them. It says it right here in the document. They're looking for whether or not there's a willingness by these countries to share burdens. And then later on in the document, check this out. Later on in the document, we see it talks about NATO. So this is the national security strategy document put out by the White House, giving their long-term view. This is November, months before this thing in Iran happened, well before, this is before the protests started happening in the streets of Tehran that led to the war. So this is much more of a broad vision. It's not about Iran and the Straits of Hormuz. Take a look at this passage here. This is really revealing. Over the long term, it is more than plausible that within a few decades, at the latest, certain NATO members will become majority non-European. As such, it is an open question whether they will view their place in the world or their alliance with the United States in the same way as those who signed the NATO Charter. In other words, when the NATO Charter was signed, European countries were European. And now look what's happening. They're being taken over by Muslims. They're being taken over by Middle Eastern immigrants who come in, and they're changing the nature. They're changing the electorates there. It's having an impact on their policy. And the question is, are these still really allies of the United States? Our broad policy for Europe should prioritize reestablishing conditions of stability within Europe and strategic stability with Russia, enabling Europe to stand on its own feet and operate as a group of aligned sovereign nations, including by taking primary responsibility for its own defense, without being dominated by any adversarial power, cultivating resistance to Europe's current trajectory within European nations. In other words, it's in the United States' interest to cultivate resistance to the takeover of Europe by jihadist Muslims, by anti-Western populations who are taking over Europe, opening European markets to U.S. goods and services, and ensuring fair treatment of U.S. workers and businesses, building up. Now, this is a really interesting bullet point. Building up the healthy nations of Central, Eastern, and Southern Europe through commercial ties, weapons sales, political collaboration, and cultural and educational exchanges. Who are these healthy nations? They're talking about Poland, Hungary, even Greece, nations that are pushing back on the Islamification of Europe, nations that are asserting their own cultural and ethnic identities, nations that are showing a willingness to spend on their own defense. And it talks openly about rewarding them. So when you hear in this news item about pulling out troops from Germany, that they're going to be reallocated to countries that are more favorable, again, this is not just a reaction to Iran. This is the plan all along. It was the plan to reevaluate this. The Iran war provided a context. It provided a situation in which that realignment could come into focus, and that reassessment could happen in light of an actual real situation that developed. But this was always the plan all along. And again, ending the perception and preventing the reality of NATO as a perpetually expanding alliance. That's also important. Encouraging Europe to take action to combat mercantilist overcapacity, technological theft, cyber espionage, and other hostile economic practices. And then later on in the Middle East section, it even talks openly about the Straits of Hormuz. America will always have core interests in ensuring that Gulf energy supplies do not fall into the hands of an outright enemy, that the Strait of Hormuz remain open, that the Red Sea remain navigable, that the region not be an incubator or exporter of terror against American interests or the American homeland, and that Israel remain secure. Okay, we can and must address this threat ideologically and militarily. Without decades of fruitless nation-building wars, we also have clear interest in expanding the Abraham Accords to more nations in the region and to other countries in the Muslim world. Folks, what are we seeing here? What we're seeing is that this pullout of U.S. troops from NATO countries, this whole approach to the other countries in Europe that are willing to spend, saying that we're going to build them up and we're going to punish these NATO countries that will refuse to help in the Iran war. This is not a knee-jerk reaction. This is the policy of the Trump administration laid out with great logic, but it's also very long-term thinking. Look at NATO. Look at Europe. Which direction is Europe headed? These guys are unwilling. They're unwilling to lift a finger against Iran because they have Muslim electorates. They have Muslim populations. They don't want to inflame their own street. They have their own domestic problems that they have to deal with. And they're caught. And the U.S. is rightly looking at them saying, okay, if you're going to capitulate to the jihadists, if you're going to go down that road culturally, demographically, if you're going to do that, then this isn't the NATO alliance that was originally signed. And we have other alliances. We have real allies and partners in other parts of the world who really want to work with us. The Abraham Accords nations, Israel, the healthier European nations. We have to reorganize things, and we have to allocate American resources where they actually help America. And again, so the bottom line of this in this video is that what we're seeing with the U.S. pullout of troops has everything to do with long-term vision. It's not about a short-term reaction to what's happened in Iran. And therefore, it's not, if people think that it's just going to blow over and Trump's temper tantrum is going to blow over and everything with NATO is going to return to normal, no way. That is not going to happen. And once those troops get pulled out, if you think that a later U.S. government, a Democrat government, let's say, comes into power, they're going to reinstate all of it, not so simple. These are massive expenses, and these are massive moves that are being made, with big allocation of resources. And it's not so simple to unwind that a few years from now when a different president comes into office. So this is a major shift. It's a long overdue shift in American foreign policy that Trump is implementing. But again, the key point of this video is this isn't a short-term decision. If you found this video helpful, please share it. Please tell other people about what we're doing on this channel, giving you analysis that brings in the bigger picture of what we're actually seeing in the world and in the Middle East. I'm currently in the United States. I'm speaking in a number of places. I'm in Washington, D.C. now. I'm going to be here for a few days. I'm going to be trying to be making as many videos as I can from my hotel room and keeping you abreast of everything that is happening. And please make sure that you're subscribed not only to this channel, but to Israel 365 News, where lots of important content is being put up every day. You don't want to miss anything. And make sure you also click the link to subscribe to our newsletters, the Israel 365 News daily newsletter and the Israel 365 Action weekly newsletter, so you don't miss all the important work that we're doing. God bless.